Hey everybody, if you're like me, a lot of the photography season is ending. I do a lot of my stuff outside. As you know, I do events up at Fort Ticonderoga, and that's all starting to wind down. So what does a photographer do when their season has hit a lull, right? When it's gone into a sleep mode? And that's time for us to start learning more things and to experiment. Now, when I talk about learning more things, I'm talking about sharpening up your Photoshop skills, taking photographs that you've done and retweaking them. I know I can keep looking at a photograph I've made and tweak it the way I think it should be, and then I'll look at it a couple of days later and think, yeah, maybe I want to tweak it a little differently. But getting those skills done, keeping that all fresh. And the best way to do that is to experiment. Now, if you've got a new camera and you've just been shooting regularly with it, you probably didn't have to play with too many settings at this point. So now's the time to play with all the different settings you've got on your camera. Now, one of the settings that the R5 had on it that I couldn't wait to try out when it was released was when they did the 100 megapixel photo. What it does is the camera shifts the lens slightly because it's a 45 megapixel camera. So how do you get 100 megs out of it? It shifts the focus just a little bit, but you can't hold the camera in order to do this. It has to be on a tripod, and you don't want to be touching it, so you have to have a remote shutter. Once you've got those two things in place and you hit that shutter, it's going to move that lens around a little bit. It takes a while, and it will make a 100 megapixel photograph of the image, and it looks fantastic. But I only use that as an example of things to play with on your camera. Look at the settings that are there and just play with them. You may have gotten a fixed set that you haven't changed that was set on the camera. You may have looked at one of those tutorials online and said, hey, these are the best settings for you to get. And you might have used them, but now play and see if they are the best ones for you. You got things around your house you can take photographs of, especially now that it's getting to be the darker half of the year up here in the Northeast. It's good time for you to play with different settings so you get used to low light situations as well. And that could mean playing with your lighting. It can mean playing with flashes. And it can mean just changing your ISO and shutter speeds to getting to the picture that you want to get. Now, I do everything handheld at the fort during the events. Setting up a tripod would be very difficult. I might be able to get away with a monopod in a lot of situations to just give it that little more stability. But when I shoot low light, that means that I have to be very careful on what I set for how low I can go on my shutter speed, for example, versus how high I can go on my ISO. So it's always a balancing act. How much do I want in focus versus how low can I go on my shutter speed so that I don't get blurred because I'm holding the camera, and how high do I want to go on the ISO because it's going to bring in noise. So play with those settings on your camera. Get to know your camera, because while there are differences among camera brands, there can be differences within cameras too, just a little bit. And knowing how your camera is going to behave will help you out over the course of your next season, going through and taking those photographs and knowing the best way to take those photographs and the best settings to set up and how low and how high you can go on certain things. Also play with different angles, right? Take people at different angles, take things at different angles. Whatever you have available to you, take photographs. We're in a digital age now, so we don't have to worry about the expense of taking photographs and having to deal with film, right? All we have to do is just take the photographs, see what we like and what we don't like about what we did, learn from it, throw it away. The only cost here is the time it takes to take the photographs and to review them. And then you'll have a whole bunch of things that you can take and play with Photoshop, or go grab whatever the latest thing is that you can find online to go play with. for applications to see how that'll help your photographic workflow. In addition to that, you can also go out and try different things like removing items. I mean, you've seen those things online where it says, hey, can you remove X, Y, or Z? This will give you an opportunity to take a picture with something in it that you want to remove, and then removing it and see how that works and see how easy that is and get that into your workflow. And if you've already been doing stuff like this, keep doing it. Repetition helps, and it'll keep you fresh while you're in your downtime, and give you something to work on and more techniques to try, more things to learn. And don't forget to take notes. There's nothing wrong with taking notes or setting presets. In Photoshop, you can set up a macro, basically, that will walk through the things that you just did. And you can go through and set those up and get ready for your next season. Maybe they'll be appropriate, maybe they won't, but you don't know until you try. There's also some online things. There was one that I used for a while that you upload a whole bunch of photographs. And it's basically designed for event photographers. It's not going to be designed for a standard portrait photographer necessarily. And the reason I say that is because you have to put thousands of pictures up for it to learn your style. And these are all pictures that you have taken and edited. So these are your final drafts. This is to get for the AI to get a feel for how you do your photographs, what your settings are on it. And on the back end, I think it's just literally taking apart the settings that are on the photograph and learning what your lighting is, what your color grading is, and going through and learning from that so that it can apply it to the next set of photographs that you upload. The advantage to something like that, for a wedding photographer especially, is it takes a long time to get photographs the way you want them. Once you've got them the way you want them, and you've been doing this for a while, you have a portfolio of work that you can upload and have this thing learn from. The downside to it is you have to have that portfolio up front. And wedding photography takes a lot of effort if you're going to do a lot of retouching. Now, I shoot raw. That means everything gets retouched. And if I were doing a wedding, which I do not do anymore, the photographs would need to be, time would be taken with each photograph. Your bride and groom especially. But I like to bring 3 dimensions into everything if I can, which is why I don't do wedding photography. I would rather do portrait and deal with a few photographs that I need to do the proper settings for and get that 3-dimensionality to it, than deal with hundreds of photographs at a wedding that I then have to go run through something. Now, doing events at Fort, sometimes I do portraits there and sometimes it's just events. So I had a ton of event photography that I had done that I could then feed into this program. It takes it, it uploads it, all the stuff's done off-site. And so it can take the photographs and it can update the photographs and it can send them back. I can do 90% with the new adaptive presets that you can do in Photoshop. So it doesn't have as much value to me as it did originally. But when you can take it and give it 100 photographs or 200 photographs and have it do 80 to 90% of the work for you, well, that cuts things down quite a bit. I can take, on a portrait, I can take up to 15 minutes to retouch an individual portrait that I've taken. That is to do dodge and burn, to set off the face, to add more shape. It's somebody who has musculature to darken the areas where the muscles are, where those creases are that you see, and highlight that a little bit more. Because again, every photograph is 2-dimensional and it doesn't give you the same as you would get if you were looking at it with your eyes. However, if you retouch them properly, you can bring that dimensionality back into the photograph and trick the eye into seeing that dimensionality. If you've ever seen the ball demonstration, it is a person starting out with a circle, a simple circle. So it's a black circular line with a white background, and they start shading it. And as they shade it, you see a ball. You get that three-dimensionality to it, so it doesn't look like now instead of just that circle that you've got, it now adds depth to the photograph. Now, obviously, it's not half gray and half white, because then it would just look like a half gray, half white circle. It would look like a yin-yang symbol almost. But by adding the gradations to it, it brings out that three-dimensionality to it. And you can do the exact same thing on a portrait photograph, but that takes time. This is not a simple thing to do. And the online piece that I was using didn't seem to replicate that part. It seemed like what it was basically doing was looking at all your photos and trying to determine the most appropriate preset to give to your photos. So you just take the photos, upload it, it sends you back the photographs with the changes to it. And here's the important part. Once you're done with editing the photographs that you get back from the system, then it's time for you to send them back up again. And you're doing that because the system's going to get things wrong. And in order for it to get it right, it has to know what it did wrong. And by giving you those photographs in what it thinks is the appropriate settings, and then getting back the other ones, it can compare what you sent it to what it did to what you did, so that next time around it can figure out a better way to do what you did with the photographs. But it has to understand that first photograph, of course, to know why it did what it did, and then go forward from there. But the advantage of this time of the year for us, who do outdoors stuff, is that we can now experiment and hone our skills so that we're even better next year. So that's what I got for you this week, and I will talk to you all next week.